Welcome to Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My name is Jesse Ott, the host of this podcast, which is all about beverage innovation. I talk with innovation pioneers from agriculture to glass. This week, I'm speaking with Kate Dingwall, a Canadian from Toronto, is a very successful freelance writer and has written for Forbes.com, The Toronto Star, Maxim, Serious Eats, Elle, Liquor.com, Wine Enthusiast, and more. Kate, like all entrepreneurs, started out doing what we all do: hustle, email, call, and partner with those in the industries that see the potential that we know is there to offer to many. Kate knew she wanted to learn the business side of our industry, so she received her graduate degree from Savannah College of Art and Design and learned all about luxury goods, fashion, wine, and spirits, which has helped her immensely in her writing career. She has a unique lens into the world through her younger sister and how they view the world growing up in the midst of climate change. This generation is putting more money and thought into the brands they choose as the environment is very important to them. They, as we know, are drinking less and looking for alternatives as they strive for a healthy lifestyle. One interesting fact that Kate shared was they are also digging into buying bottles of wine from new and unknown areas around the world. Kate is a world traveler and has been to amazing areas around the world like Armenia and most recently to Japan to report on Sochu. Thank you for listening and be sure to subscribe to be notified of all new episodes. Welcome, everybody, to Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My name is Jesse Ott, and I have Kate Dingwall here. Hi, Kate. How are you doing today?
How are you?
I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today. I know we've been kind of going back and forth, but Kate is a travel writer. And so she gets paid to do all the fun stuff and travel around the world and eat and drink her way through it, which is, a dream job, I would imagine. I don't know if it's something that you thought you'd, want as a youngster, but probably a writer in some ways, I would imagine.
No, I had no clue what I wanted to do. I went through
No?
my undergrad trying different courses and figuring it out. I actually really loved art history and architecture history and thought I'd end up somewhere in that realm.
Oh,
But wine is kind of a lot of that. So, and travel writing
it is.
relates a lot to that. So, as I grew up, I started getting more stories. And to backtrack a little bit, I started as the fashion editor of a Canadian fashion magazine. Liked clothes, thought that was a pretty good gig at 19.
Yeah, that's fun.
So that was really fun. But I grew up working in restaurants. I'd been working in restaurants since I was 15. So that wine bug started very early, but never really like a
Very
solid
young.
career. Try telling your parents at
Right.
16, 17 that you want to work in wine, they'll roll your eyes. So
Right. They're like, no, you're going to college, kid.
Figure it out there. You can drink lots of wine, but then you figure it out.
Figure it out. So where are you calling from today?
I'm based in Toronto. So right in the center of Canada. Lovely city with a really great food and drinking scene.
Nice. So you're born and raised then in Toronto?
Born and raised. I lived in the States for 8 years. In my 20s, I did my master's down there and got a visa through that. So I ended up living in New York and writing there for quite a while.
Oh, what a great place, especially for food and beverage. I mean, the restaurant scene is insane there. Even as a youngster, I lived there in my 20s. The competition is so stiff that you could get a pretty good meal for a pretty good price back then. I haven't been back in a really long time. But this is the 2000s, mid 2000, like 3, 4, 5, 6, something like that. It's been a minute.
Yeah, the prices have definitely gone up. I was down there a couple of weekends ago, and we're now living in the world of the $30 martini.
Oh my gosh.
Great martini.
I know that when I yes, very good martinis. Yes, I remember when I would go back up there, probably 10, 15 years ago, people were leaving because they couldn't afford the rent and live. I mean, it's kind of happening everywhere, especially if you're looking at, the restaurant industry and the wait staff. They can't afford the skyrocketing rents in any of the cities anymore.
Yeah,
it's
most
crazy.
major cities are having massive cost of living issues. Even here in Canada, it's almost impossible to find a one bedroom under 2,000, 2,500 within the city. And
Yeah.
wait staff is a great point. How are people who are making minimum wage supposed to afford that and work in the downtown core?
Yeah. I know when I have people in the restaurant industry on my podcast, I ask what are the three main problems, and they say labor, labor, labor. I mean, it's a struggle. I don't know what the answer is, and I interviewed Pavel Martinez, and he's in like the Puerto Vallarta, no, Cancun area. And he said this is the same problem in Mexico. So it's the same. It must be the same everywhere, at least over here. I don't know about Europe or even Japan because you don't tip over there or anything.
Yeah, and I think after the pandemic, there were so many. Well, I've worked in service for a long time, alongside writing, but there were so many people who were just awful to service people who are in the service industry, masking, not masking, vaccine passports, etc. That people don't get
Yeah.
paid enough to do that. Like, I don't know how you expect people to withstand verbal and some cases physical abuse for tips.
Yeah, no wonder they, a bunch of people back during COVID were like, I'm
Yeah,
going back to school. I'm doing anything but this.
this sucks. Why am I doing this?
you know? Yeah, and as a restaurant, I've never been a restaurant operator, but I've listened to podcasts and people that have owned them. They're like, if you can get a 3% margin, you're
Mhm.
winning. And so it's just a tough
Yeah,
business.
but on the flip side, we've seen a lot more restaurant groups work harder to keep their staff, offer education programs,
Yep.
health benefits, dental benefits, higher wages, and work that out on the menu side of things to make up for
Yep.
those costs, but create a work environment where people actually want to stay.
Yep. It's better for everybody. It's better for us as customers. It's better for them. It's better for the owner. It creates loyalty. I know that those are some things that I've heard, people talk about is, they're definitely trying to keep people cuz the wait staff, according to Kelly, he sees it as their brand. It's literally the extension of their
And
brand,
you can tell when you walk
you
into
know?
a restaurant or bar
So
and
it's
your hospitality team is miserable. And then you can tell when they actually love where they're
Oh
working
yeah.
and believe in what they're selling and the experience they're creating.
Yeah, you know the bad groups in town pretty quickly by that, don't you? Because they don't hide it anymore. They're like, these kids are like, screw it. I'm been treated like crap in some cases, not all. But yeah, that's interesting. It's a different world, and and also I keep referring to people on the podcast, but with these younger kids, I don't know if you're seeing it when in your travels. But what is that restaurant world going to look like with the new generation that are playing video games all with their friends all over the world? Is it going to be the same? Are they going to put those devices down? I guess we don't really know. Have you done any digging into that topic at all?
Into youth and kind of the upcoming generations.
Yeah, like what the restaurant world how they might be affected by the newer generations. I mean, they're already drinking less, they're drinking lower alcohol. They're really changing kind of it's changing our industry faster than it's moved in a really long time.
Yeah, and I think the generations that are incoming are grew up in the world of climate change and it really affects them. My younger sister is in that generation and they're being very vocal about how they want the world to look. They're putting more money and more thought space into brands that are doing better for the environment. They're taking better care of themselves by drinking a little bit less or looking for alternatives to kind of what I grew up with, which was keg parties and things that I went to in college. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, there is pot, but I feel like pot's kind of taken over that world um, to some degree. At least that's what I've seen in my nieces. And they're all in their 20s now, younger 20s.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Who knows?
Well, I guess with the legalization of
It'll be
marijuana in Canada, it's completely legal. There's several states, I believe. I'm not as well versed in that culture, but and then CBD, which is great for
everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just become a bit more normalcy. I think someone once compared, I forget who said it, but alcohol is to their generation, which that cigarettes is to the millennial generation. So
Interesting.
it's
Yeah.
becoming a bit more taboo,
That
less
makes sense.
common.
And where does Jewel fit
Oh,
in
I know.
there?
That's a nightmare.
Jeez. Uh, did you see that
No, I
documentary?
didn't.
Uh, enough is interesting. I mean, marketing genius, just kind of the, you know, it was the right demographic, but wrong to do it. They just didn't know it. It was kind of bizarre. Anyway, it was good marketing. It was bad for kids, right? So it's kind of a mess, but yeah. Anyway, I'm not here to talk about Jewel. So, so you said did you go to college then in Toronto?
Yeah, I went to school at
No, you went.
I went to my undergrad degree at a university west of Toronto, and then I did my master's in brand production
Okay.
in Georgia at the at SCAD. And then I had 5 years in between those degrees working in media, print media.
Oh, I got you. Okay, so when you like Georgia,
The state,
the state of
the
Georgia in the
state of
U.S.
Georgia in the U.S.
Oh, I thought you said New York. So were you in New York in between that time?
Afterwards.
Okay, so you went to Georgia, got your visa, was in school, and then went to New York and was around.
Yeah, if
Okay,
you go to school,
yeah,
you
New York
get
is
a
a
visa.
great
Yeah, New
experience.
York is fun. It was really great as kind of a up and coming writer to have those experiences, especially in food and beverage. And New York is such a hub for that.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, the culinary scene is really like no
Mhm.
other. But there are other cities in the U.S. too. I don't know how much time you spent traveling while you were here. I was celebrating my friend's 50th birthday, and she's now living in Southern Florida, and the restaurants in Dallas are just so great. It's like the biggest secret in the United States, I swear. Really good quality. It used to be not expensive. It's not. It's still it's expensive everywhere. Um, but Dallas is quite the foodie city. It has a little bit of recognition for it, but not much, which is okay with us because we don't really need it to get more expensive and more popular.
Yeah, a nice hidden gem. That's always really lovely.
Yeah, it is. And every neighborhood kind of has its own little pockets of good food. And all genres, from all over, so it's really really awesome. We're lucky here. Um, okay, so you went to Western or school in undergrad in Western Toronto. Then you went to Georgia, and so what degree did you get in
My
Georgia?
master's of brand direction.
Oh, brand direction. Okay, sorry. The internet went out for just a little bit there. Okay, so what does that entail? Because that sounds really interesting.
So I had been working in media for quite a while, but I didn't really have a business knowledge. Like I kind of came up through doing a liberal arts undergrad and moved into fashion and a lot more of the lifestyle coverage, but had no knowledge of business. And that's kind of you're missing a large part of the story if you don't really understand how brands make money, marketing works. So I really wanted to get an education to kind of
Yeah.
round out that knowledge and be a better journalist. So I was looking at business programs, and the Savannah College of Art and Design had a fantastic uh, master's program, just a year, that focused on luxury goods, fashion, wine and spirits, and how all of those brands are like how to build a brand from the ground up and how to market a brand, which I was really interested in. It felt like it had a lot of parallels for what I was
Yeah.
covering, and they had a really good scholarship program too, which helped. Media is
Nice.
notoriously a horrible
That's
paying
important.
industry. So, and I would get a
It
visa to live
is.
in the United States, which was a bit of it checked a lot of boxes that degree did.
Yeah, it did. So, well, Savannah's a nice little community. I've been there a long, long time ago, a couple of times, but um so how long ago was that you were in Georgia?
8 years ago.
Okay, so not that long
Yeah.
ago. Yeah, it's a pretty city. It's old school.
Yeah, it's a really cool city. There's with such a major arts university there, there's been a lot of people who stay on
True.
afterwards and open up their own businesses, restaurants, bars. So there's quite a youthful, lively energy to the city and their beverage bar and beverage program.
Oh, that's
Yeah, it was a
awesome.
really fun city to
Oh,
live
that's
in.
fantastic. Yeah, does it have that small town feel that I remember?
Yeah, absolutely. So I could afford to live downtown, which was fantastic. It's still a very small touristy city. Get bike to classes
Yeah.
within 20 minutes. It was fantastic. It was a great quality of life down there.
Oh, that's nice. That's really nice. And so then you did you get a job in New York, or did you just head up to New York and
I was,
look to see what jobs are available, I guess?
yeah, I've been freelance for a decade now. So I build my career based on stories I pitch to outlets, relationships that I have with editors, and I'll usually write around 20 stories a month. So that's been my
Wow.
workload for the last almost a decade now.
Wow, 20 stories a month for the last decade? That's
Yeah,
intense.
some of them are shorter, some of them are longer. It'll go up to 30, it'll go down to 10, depending
Yeah.
on the breadth and length of a story.
Yeah. I suppose how much research, or if you're traveling. I know you travel quite a bit, which is really fun. What was your last trip?
Last trip, I was in the Okanagan a couple weeks ago writing a story on diversity in wine out there. So the Okanagan is the southern part of British Columbia. So it's right in the center, and it's this wonderful, very budding wine region in the interior, right in
Nice.
the Rockies.
Oh, what kind of wine?
Depends on the winery. The southern part of the region is quite warm. So there's a lot of Cabernet Franc there, but they do get those like very frigid cold winters. So you get a lot of these cool like Bordeaux varieties. Depends on the year there. And since the region in general is still only 30 maximum years old, there's a lot of conversations around what grapes work best. So there you can find plantings of
Okay.
dozens of different grape varieties out there. Depending on the elevation of where the winemakers are in the valley, they'll plant maybe cooler climate on the west side of the valley. East side of the valley is planting like rosés. The bottom of the or grapes that work well in rosés. So Cinsault, Grenache, Mourvedre. Bottom of the valley is quite hot and it's protected from, so it gets a lot of sun exposure. So you're getting, oh, some people were debating planting Grenache, which is kind of cool.
Oh,
So it's still a
wow.
budding one,
Yeah, because
kind of
that's
redefining. Well, they're defining what they want to be in terms of style, climate, etc. With
well, that's an exciting time. I feel like I've had this similar conversation with Pavel about Mexican wines too. Have you touched on Mexican wines, or been exposed to any of the industry down there, or traveled down
Yeah,
there?
I was in the Val de Guadalupe 4 weeks ago with some fantastic Mexican wine importers, and I had the chance to talk to quite a lot of producers down there, get a good feel of what the industry is currently at, and that was really really cool. That was one of my favorite trips I've been on.
Yeah. Oh, really? Do you see similarities in kind of how they're trying to figure out, I mean, maybe in Mexico and obviously in parts it's been longer than 30 years, but is there the same kind of energy or the same kind of vibe about figuring out what wines work best where?
Yes and no. So Mexico, especially in that area, the Valle de Guadalupe, has a very long history of being a winemaking region. They have grapes planted back to I think like
Mhm.
400 years. Correct me if I'm wrong, but so they have a very long history of winemaking. But for a long time, their focuses were turned to brandy. So growing grapes that were better
Okay.
suited for brandy, and grapes like that aren't necessarily great for still wines. Um, so over
Right.
the last kind of 30 years there's been a lot of producers kind of taking a step back and being like, hey, we've got this fantastic land, we've got some really old vines, why aren't we doing that? I think maybe in the 90s there were only 10 producers of still wine in the Valle de Guadalupe. So over the last kind of 20, 30 years now, a lot of producers have been replanting and making their own wines and not making brandy and trying to figure out what the future looks like for that region. Is it sparkling wines? There's been a lot of Chenin Blanc, which I've had a couple of Chenin Blancs from that region, and it's
Hmm,
fantastic. Like, it's got a little bit of that minerality you want from a classic French Chenin, but a lot of texture too. And it's
nice.
really a beautiful wine region, and I think a region we're going to see a lot more of in the future.
I really hope so. I asked Pavel the same, kind of question if there's a lot of investment happening there, and he said there's a lot of investment, and when you see your bigger producers in France and Chile and United States, a lot of the winemakers will cross over into different regions and work together with other wineries and whatnot. So I asked him if some of that was happening, and he said yeah. So I'm 100% with you on board. I think that's going to be an exciting place. I've only been down to Mexico once and tried some of their wines at the restaurants, which is you only get a few to choose from. Um, but they were really good, and I was really impressed. So I'm excited to hear you have such a great experience. Hopefully, they can make enough to export it here,
Yeah,
because I know that can be a challenge.
yeah. I was with a couple of folks who import to the United States Mexican wine, and they're starting to get more and more traction in major markets and in smaller markets. So they're doing a lot of work on the ground. And it's cool to see in that region, the producers are all excited for each other because it's such a region that's unknown outside of Mexico to a lot of wine folks. All of the winemakers are talking to each
Hmm.
other. They're all really proud of each other. They're all kind of having a lot of conversations with their colleagues and peers on what works in that area, what doesn't, and they really see a win for one winemaker as a win for the entire region.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've mentioned this before. Ted Basler, who was the president of Saint Michel back in the day. It's like Washington wine used to be in that same boat. If one wine gets on a wine menu, we all win, right? It's a united front to try to get just the educational component across to different consumers and obviously
Mm-hmm.
restaurateurs and distributors on this new area of where there's going to be growth of really good wines. I mean, to me, that's innovation, right? That's fun, just like your trip in Canada, like just seeing these new wine regions that aren't necessarily new, but maybe new to us to kind of discover and dig into, and for you, write stories,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is
Yeah, and
exciting.
I know we talked a little bit about the younger generation, and a lot of the information we're seeing on that demographic is they're super excited about new regions. Like, I can barely afford white Burgundy anymore, and it's one of my favorite bottles, and it's so younger generations are really getting priced out of like the classic Bordeaux, Burgundy, things like that.
Yep.
And younger generations are having to look to cool new wine regions. Hey, maybe I can afford this Mexican wine because it's a relatively unknown region. They can't command those prices anymore, even though the quality is there and the work is there. Uh, and
Yep.
so those kids who are coming in, turning 21, turning 25, they're buying bottles from weird regions of Portugal, the Azores, Mexico. They're exploring the world through wine, which is a really, really cool trend we're seeing.
Oh, that is cool. I love that. It's more available, right? It's just more available to them, which is really cool. And speaking of, being in our 20s and getting our career started, I saw you wrote an article on box wine. What is your thoughts there? Because I know it's a big trend here in the U.S. and it's not going away anytime soon. And quite frankly, the quality, in my opinion, is getting really good. There's pretty good rated wines in boxes these
Yeah,
days.
I think from a lot of the samples I pulled and the producers I chatted with for that article, the quality is fantastic. They have to do quite a lot of that said, they have to do quite a lot of work to break down all of the bad rap that boxed wine has. I remember being in college and
Hmm.
we'd buy boxed wine because it was cheap and the quality wasn't fantastic, but the bang for your buck was there. But a lot of
It
it
was
was
there.
there. It was great. A lot of the new producers, they're a little bit more expensive than the garbage box wine you used to
Sure.
purchase, but it's a more sustainable format. it's more recyclable. It uses less gas, which means it uses less carbon emissions during the production process. The quality is quite good. And it's really like speaking to moderation, like we were chatting about earlier. It's a lovely format if you don't want to drink a bottle of wine. My partner doesn't
Yep.
drink, so when I want to have a glass of wine, it's kind of okay. Well, I can open the bottle and drink half the bottle tonight and half the bottle tomorrow, and then it'll be bad, or I can just let the bottle go bad. So it's formats like boxed wine would allow me to have one glass with a movie, or one glass over drink the bottle over a course of a couple weeks, which is really nice. I never really want to drink that much a bottle of wine over a couple of days. Oh, cans are similar. That's a similar trend we're seeing coming in,
Yeah.
and the quality is fantastic. I've had some really, really good canned wines recently.
Yeah, agreed. I'm 100% with you because my wife doesn't drink that much wine. She will. She's more of a white wine person if she does drink it, which I don't care. I'll drink both. I like both red and white. But yeah, I love that box part of it because I think they last up to 3 months in the bag, which is great because like you said, if you leave sometimes a wine overnight and the bottle's open, it's not it's not as good as the day before. So wines aren't being made to age like they used to, right? They're being made to be drunk now because that's what we do. We drink it now. We don't. I mean, people do have cellars, but especially the younger generations, you know, they're just drink now. I mean, that's the way we were.
Yeah, those box
you
wines
know.
are definitely formulated to drink it now. You are not sitting on that.
Yeah. So what is like a trip that you've been that you were really really surprised about, whatever it was on that trip that you found really interesting?
I was in
Just something that's really not forgettable.
a recent one that trip that really resonated with me. I was in Armenia, which is one of the oldest winemaking cultures in the world. To discover what's going on there with the wine scene right now. And it was a really beautiful community. A lot of small winemakers, a lot of medium sized winemakers, all just trying to work with indigenous Armenian grapes and bring more of a focus on this history that's thousands and thousands of years old through their wine. The landscape is gorgeous as well. The people are so warm. They've had a real tough go of it. So, but they're so welcoming to strangers and to
Yeah.
visitors, and they really made us feel like home when we were in their houses and wineries.
Yeah, I'm sure they're honored to have you guys come in and care about what they're doing in Armenia. You don't when even I'm WS at level 3. That's not a place that I would think about when it comes to wine. So I'm sure they're more than excited to talk about what writers of the wine world to come and talk about what they're doing. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, and yeah, like you mentioned, it's not a wine region that's on classical exams, and yet it was perhaps the oldest region. It goes back and forth between Georgia and Armenia. I think the oldest wine growing or wine grape was found in Georgia, but the oldest wine equipment was found in Armenia. And these dates back
Okay.
literally thousands and thousands of years. It's really, really cool. So it has such a history of wine, and modern day winemaking was really born out of Armenia and Georgia. So it's really
That is really
important.
cool. Not very many people know that. I have a cousin who has traveled to Georgia, and they drink a lot apparently over there, and they really are proud of being. They of course they both claim that they started wine, but you go to Czech Republic, you go wherever, and everybody started brewing beer first, right? So it's so hard to know. But from your perspective, it's interesting that you say Georgia really is the first area with wine grapes, but Armenia is the first one with wine equipment. That's really
Yeah.
interesting
And
history.
I'm sure more, they're still doing excavations in both countries of places they think that there were winemaking facilities. So I'm sure we'll go back and forth for ages where Georgia finds a new thing, Armenia
Huh.
finds a new quervy or a clay pot. But both have the moral of the story is both have very, very historic winemaking regions. The Armenia was, I was at the there's a place in Armenia called the Areni Cave, and that's where they found the oldest oldest winemaking facility. And a lot of it was used as a place for human sacrifices. So they found all these bodies in the old clay vessels. It's
Oh
literally in the
no.
side of a cave, and you have to kind of hike up to it. It's really wild to see.
That is wild. So I hope that the both of them weren't part of the other. I hope they weren't human sacrifices over the, delicious wine. I'm sure it was really awesome back then. But but oh, that's really cool. That's really, digging into history there. That's really cool. So, as you've navigated through this, and I mean, you're obviously your business school, helped you a lot because you started doing your own, basically running your own business for 10 years, which is pretty impressive. So, was there any mentors or anybody that kind of helped you along that path that you reached out to or ran into, or a professor or anybody that was kind of an influential in that path or that journey?
I was thinking about this, but honestly, not that many. Wine is, well, we've come a long way in terms of gender diversity and general diversity in wine, but when I started, it was pretty male dominated and a bit bullish to enter. But I'd say the people who mean the most to my career are editors who kind of took my, oh my God, I was looking through some of my story ideas that I'd send people like 8, 9 years ago, and they were awful. They were brutal ideas. They were really bad.
I bet they
They
were.
were, every once in a while I have to go back and like through my email and find information, and I'll look at some of these ideas and they're awful. I'm embarrassed to read them, but I still had some editors who I'd pitch blind, like I'd never met them. I just emailed them with an idea and how I want to write about it, and they take a chance on it. And I could name off probably 6 or 7 editors who took a chance on some pretty mediocre ideas and work with me to form the stories, kind of
Well,
teach me about, like, take a lot of time out of their own workday to edit my pretty awful, very green stories and teach me how to be a better writer and how to be a better voice in the wine industry. So I know I still work with a lot of these editors today. They've moved publications, I've moved publications, et cetera, et cetera. And they're still wonderful people. So they're all women actually. So I just really appreciate
oh, that's
taking the
great.
time on young writers and people who maybe aren't as established, and that still means a lot to me, like years later.
Yeah, I think, maybe from their perspective, they see this generation that needs a voice, and you're persistent enough. Your work is, I mean, they obviously saw something in it. I mean, 8 years ago, the life was different too. So, you have to take that into the overall perspective of it. But they obviously saw something and a passion that you had, and were like, yes, we need this. We want her to succeed because she needs a voice in this industry. And they helped you along the way, which is we're all thankful for it because your stories are great. Your articles are awesome, and you've taken us on your journeys of travel around the
Well, thank
world.
you.
So that's
Yeah,
awesome.
whenever I see young writers, and I try and be as excited about it as possible. The wine industry always needs new voices, especially new voices from people who aren't middle-aged white men. So it's really exciting to have new people come into the space, and it's something I think we can all cheer for.
Yeah, definitely. S- you know Speaking of mentors, is there any other resources, or I mean, obviously business school seemed to be really key for you. That's an awesome experience. Is it like, do you listen to podcasts, or is there any outreach that you use to kind of help, along the way, for or any other writers, or is it pretty much your human contacts with these editors that have kind of helped kind of shape that your current position and where you are today?
Well, wine is a really beautiful space, and I do write about spirits as well, so this does extend to it. In which you can never know everything. Like, no one knows everything about wine. There's always something to learn. There's always a new region to discover. There's always new grapes to learn about. I still get so excited when someone
Mhm.
mentions a grape, and I'm like, I've never heard of that before in my life. So the kind of biggest thing you can,
And then you learn it's been around for
yeah,
thousands of years.
I can't even pronounce that. Like, what is a Voskia? So the biggest kind of thing you can do for yourself in wine and spirits is just keep reading and keep learning. Buy a new wine book, sit on the couch, pour a glass of something mentioned in that book, and just learn about it. So I think that's why I've ended up in wine. I was always a big school nerd, so I have entered a life full of school. Basically, is how I see it sometimes. But
Yeah, I
yeah,
agree. Learning is
learning
fun.
is fun. Just read, figure out what wine writer you really like, read a lot of their stuff, buy a bunch of books, buy some wines you've never heard of from a region you've never heard of or made from a grape that you've never heard of, and just figure out what it is. It doesn't have to be a big endeavor. I'm not asking you to read a 700-page world of wine book right now, but just take on a chapter, just learn a new tidbit. It'll help your education, and that'll take you everywhere.
Have you been to Pro
No, I
Wine?
haven't.
You have to make it a point to go and write about it because it's the most amazing experience I've ever had in my career. Outside of obviously trips that I've taken with different companies to that I worked for, because you get exposed to literally the entire world in just a few buildings, and they have spirits there too, high end, really good spirits. Um, I fell in love with Portuguese wines there. Oh my gosh, they are making such great wines there. It's coming to the US, but it's really slow. I think it's the grape varietals are really difficult and hard to understand, which is a big challenge. And I had a woman winemaker from Moldova. She had a Chardonnay that literally it made me cry. I know that sounds really stupid, but I was like, "Holy cow, Moldova! This is amazing! I cannot believe how amazing this wine tastes." So, yeah, that. Oh, I wish I could go with you. That'd be so much fun. It was the greatest experience. The German wines that and you just get exposed to a lot of different people and a lot of innovation as well. Um, and it's Germany, so it's extremely well done.
Organized.
Um, yeah, it's very organized. So yeah, that would be something I would recommend at some point in your career if you can do it. Uh, you mentioned before we got on that you're going to Japan next. So what can you tell us a little bit about what to expect
Yeah,
there?
I'm actually going over there with a sochu importer, and sochu is a Japanese distilled spirit, not soju, which is Korean, but it's a Japanese distilled spirit. So I'll be over there to visit a bunch of distilleries and kind of taste through things and understand a bit more of the diversity of the category. And I'm very excited for that. I've never been to Japan, so this should be a new experience for me.
So where are you going?
Uh,
Are you kind of been being taken to around?
I'll be centralized down in the south where most of the sochu distilleries are because I think we're going to try and hit 3 distilleries a day for 5 days. So that's where most of the distilleries are centralized.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. Um that is really exciting. We didn't get too much in the countryside, but I know that about an hour, maybe hour and a half outside of Tokyo, there's a region where there's a bunch of wineries too. And I read that there's like 80 wineries in Japan, so you'll have to try a few of their wines while you're over there. I thought they were pretty good, but the restaurant culture is different there. I'm curious. I'll be curious to see what you think of it when you go in this south area of Japan. But in the cities, for the most part, a restaurant is a restaurant, and you get a sake, you get a beer, and then you might get a highball. It's not it's not like you get a wine list and you get. I mean, some of the restaurants are traditional like that, and that's where I did get the chance to try some of the wines made there. Suntory obviously is the king, right? So you'll see Suntory whiskey and Jim Beam everywhere, which was wonderful for me because I used to work with them and love those brands. You can get sake out of a vending machine. That's you got to do it. You got to do it. You got to try it once because it's just so fun. I mean, you can get beer and highball and all that in vending machines over there. It's just not a thing. The drinking culture is just different there.
Yeah, I'm very excited. So circle back with me in a couple of weeks when I have more to say about. But I'm expecting a lot of good food and a lot of fantastic highballs.
Yes, and definitely drink as much sake as you can in between that you can. Um, I really think that sake is going to be a big deal here in the U.S. I think it's coming. It's here in certain parts that have been, you know, worked and educated for 20, 30 years. So I don't know if it's the same in Canada, if you see it as a category that's kind of up and coming, but I really think there's going to be a lot more interest here in the US and a lot more focus on it.
Yeah, I've seen it's quite established in, I'd say, New York and Toronto. There's a big, sake is introduced to a lot more restaurants and as a beautiful pairing options. A friend of mine runs a fantastic
Yeah.
restaurant in Toronto that has so many sakes, and every time I go there I'm just blown away by pairing, like the diversity of the category, by the pairing opportunities. I always taste something new. I think I know about sake, and then I go there and I learn 75 new things and I'm like, I know nothing. This is beautiful. This is fantastic. And now there's American sake breweries, which is really really cool. So they're kind of translating the thought of terroir and sake over to the American climate, which is really really cool.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing too. Spoke with someone this week who is starting to work with there's a family there that has been um, farming Japanese style of rice that's specifically for sake for like 30 or 40 years or something. It was, I think, her grandfather, like after the war. And it's really impressive because apparently this area in Arkansas is the same area and latitude as it is in Japan.
Oh, cool.
So maybe you'll learn some of that when you're over there. And I guess the hot springs with the water and the quality of the water is the pH balance is perfect. And so, they're building a milling facility to help to start, um, making more sakes. And Asahi's here in New York, doing their Desai Blue. So more and more, I think we're going to see coming in to the market, and I'll be interested in knowing what's happening in Canada too, because I know Mexico. Talking to Bevel, they were like, we had to find an expert to fly him in and teach us about sake because it's an
Mhm.
interest. It's just the education hasn't
There's
caught up.
now a sake brewery in Mexico. They're working with
Yeah, I
Mexican
believe
rice.
it.
It's really and the product's beautiful. It's really yummy. It's I don't think it's exported into the United States yet though.
Yeah, it's well, everybody's got to get a start, you know. Um, So yeah, it's kind of fun. It's see this innovation. I love it. It's exciting. I cannot wait to hear about your trip to Japan. I think you're gonna love it. Is it you said 5 days? Are you gonna get to spend any time before or after?
No, I've been traveling. I was debating extending and kind of doing my own personal trip through Japan, but I've been traveling quite a bit lately, and my partner would like me to spend a little bit more time at home. So I'm using this as kind of an introduction to Japan. And thankfully, I get to travel for work. So I'm sure I'll be over there again soon. And next time, I'd love to extend and travel around a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, I hope so. I get that. I get that you're just you just want to be home. It is kind of, you know, the holiday season is around the corner, and so I totally get that. Um, so when you think about the industry from your perspective as a writer and as someone that's traveled and talked to different families and different people all over the world, what do you think is a pain point that you're seeing in the industry that is a challenging one? I mean, we've kind of talked about restaurants and labor, but do you see anything else that's kind of a consistent challenge that you're seeing?
I think the conversations around incoming generations have been really funny to see. Oh, I've been in Napa 6 or 7 times this year, and there's everyone. I'm well. I'm not sure if you saw the Silicon Valley Bank's report this year that declared that young people aren't drinking wine, which caused a bit of a upset, outrage, kind of crisis of self for a lot of winemakers. Like, what are we going to do when when all of our drinkers age up and pass away? Like, what does the future of our winery look like? And
Yeah.
as someone who's worked the floor as a somm for a long time, I don't, I'm seeing like young kids spend money on wine. They're just doing so a lot more thoughtfully. They're supporting a lot more brands that are environmental in ethos and sustainable in practice and a lot more earth friendly, and or just practicing farming and winemaking in ways that are very conscious. I'm seeing a lot more kind of
Mm-hmm.
fun brands that wouldn't be counted in the Silicon Valley Bank's report. So I'm curious, and I don't have an answer, but I'm curious to see how incoming generations uh, enter the wine industry and how they interact with the wine industry and what their values are and how that relates to purchasing and bottle choice and what wine regions they support. And I think there's a very
Yeah.
huge generational gap right now.
Yeah, there really is. And how that all works in, we just don't really know. I mean, there is more options, so there's more distractions, with RTDs and can this and can that or whatever. You know, so maybe that's sort of a bridge for now until we've, because a lot of this is going to shake out, right? It's not all going to be able to make it the long haul. So, and you see the cycle of and the ebbs and flows of the different wine, beer, and spirits. I know spirits passed beer for the first time ever, which, in the United States in terms of percentage, which is huge. I mean, that's probably a pretty decent concern for beer. But they are expanding beyond just beers now and seeing the future and participating in that. So I think it's going to be a very interesting 4 to 5 years to see, who stays around, what shakes out, and to your point, like, okay, well, is are we really losing wine wine drinkers, or are they just choosing it differently? Like you said, they're choosing it maybe like choosing it um, from a different perspective than just, yeah, I want a red wine or yeah, I want a cab. That's more of they're more attached to brands, I guess, than the idea of just having a glass of wine. Is that you think that's kind of what's happening?
I think there's a lot of things at play. I think a big thing that fueled kind of the concern around the Silicon Valley Bank is older generations used to base their purchasing decisions off like Robert Parker scores and other major magazine scores, and younger generations don't really care. There was a report that came out a couple days ago actually that
No.
said like wine publication scores and reviews are the least priority when millennials and younger are picking a bottle of wine. So I think they're just looking for brands that are, I don't know, active on Instagram, things like that, or just tell a bit more of a story in a sense of place, in a sense of people. So yeah, there's also the diversity of categories. Canned wine is a thing. There are hard seltzers. There's canned cocktails. There's a lot more convenience-based beverages, which are taking shares from primarily beer. But so there's just a lot of
Yeah.
change in the industry right now, and it's interesting to see how that'll come out. Now you can purchase wine online, which is a big thing that we didn't really have for a long time. So now people are shopping online, and your digital presence for your winery or beverage brand is way more important than it used to be. So there's just all of this kind of
Yep.
tectonic plates shifting in wine and spirits and beverages, and it'll be interesting to see where we land, because I think a lot of brands are kind of confused.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, you think about their attention span too, right? Their attention span is a lot faster because they scroll, they're just on their phones or whatever scrolling. They'll be watching a movie, but they'll still have their phones on, right? Watching and scrolling. So it's it's a different learning experience too. To your point, storytelling is, as a marketer, that's super exciting because that's where we get to have a lot of fun in telling stories about different brands. So that's encouraging. I think, you know, different podcasts or whatever I listen to, marketing is fun, just like writing. The game just changes a little bit, right? And you just got to change a little bit with the game.
Yeah,
I
even wine
mean,
marketing 20 years ago used to be, we have Robert Parker's favorite cab of the year, and that was kind of it. Like,
yeah, and to your point, the he doesn't resonate with the younger kids. So is it a younger generation that needs to step up and be kind of take over that space for them, or to your point, they just don't
well, I
care?
think they care. Well, I think they care about wine and what they drink. They just have different priorities. We're talking about digitally native generations who grew up on computers and phones and are very globally aware and self-aware and very conscious of the environment. So I think they just have different purchasing priorities, and a score, they need more of a story than a score.
Yeah, I love that though. That's great. Yeah, I've never thought about the wine industry in that perspective, so thank you for mentioning that. It just kind of opens the door to so many possibilities. And being in the when you're in the industry, it's hard to step out and look in. Um, being in the industry, knowing Robert Parker and some others that are just, the ratings are everything because they've always been for decades now. But you're right, like it hasn't really evolved too much since then about who's that voice, who is that person, and now does it even matter?
Yeah.
Like you said, it's more about stories. So that's such a cool perspective to
Yeah,
think
and I don't
about.
even know if there is a voice for that generation. Like, is it someone on TikTok? Is it someone on Instagram? Is it just a wine writer? Is it their friends? I think there was some statistics around most people in those generations care more about the review of their friends who really liked a wine and they brought it over rather than a score on paper. So I think marketing wise we're trying to figure out what that generation looks to and who is their North Star when it comes to uh, deciding if a wine is good and purchasable.
Well, there you go, Kate. The door is open. You got a second career. You could go and rate wines and be a storyteller. That's kind of cool, though.
Yeah, and that's kind of a lot of what I already do. I write about wines.
Yeah, you kind of already do that. Yeah.
You will not get me on TikTok though.
You don't want the Chinese government watching you. I don't know if that's true. I gave it a go, but I can't manage it all. It's too
Yeah,
much.
I already run my own business. I'm not about to start a side hustle on TikTok. I just, when I have more free time, maybe.
Yeah, because making those videos is a skill, and you got to really teach yourself how to do it. And for me, I was talking to my mentor. He's like, "Well, I watch my kids, and these kids can just do everything on their phone and just in 30 seconds, just post it." And I'm like, "What? That would take me 2 hours
Well,
on the
I
computer."
tried to make a reel of my trip to Vita Guadalupe, and it took me so long, and I kept accidentally deleting things. And I'm like, I have so much
Oh
respect for people who
no,
make reels and TikToks. It's such a hard skill to learn, and they do such beautiful jobs of it. And I'm like, oh my god! After trying,
I
I'm like,
know.
great. This is, you're a talent. I can do this, so I'm going to stick to words. That is what I'm good at. Thank you.
Yeah, I did one. I did one, and I was like, "Oh, I'm done.
Yeah, I'm like, this is.
I'm with
I
you."
have other talents. I will leave this to people who are good at it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What do they say? Trying to learn a weakness is like taking away from your strength.
Oh, interesting. I like that.
Yeah, I thought that resonated with me too because you can't do everything. Not everybody's meant to do everything, so you got to find those other people that help balance your
Yeah,
weaknesses.
balance out your skill set.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you spend all your time fixing your weaknesses, then you're losing time on what you're really good at. So that's really cool. So, any outlook that we haven't discussed already? I know we kind of talked about a lot of things here. Any other trends or anything you're seeing that might disrupt the industry in the coming years?
um, Beyond what we talked about, I think just seeing new generations age into appreciating wine will be cool. I think the younger generations have such a focus on taking care of our planet, and seeing winemakers kind of embrace that and catch up to that is really beautiful. I think, well, we see the fires, hard frosts, like all of the global disasters going on, and it's a bit hard to ignore that. And as someone in wine, it's horrifying to see that. Like we're seeing
It is. It
champagne
is.
completely have barely any vintage. We're seeing the Okanagan this year is going to barely have any vintage because of frost snaps and other climate crises. So it's horrifying. And I think, especially as someone who is younger, like it's pretty scary to think about what the wine industry will be like in 40, 50 years. So I think the focus on sustainability and environmental impact being more a louder conversation within wine is promising for me. And I think that'll be just continue to be a larger shift.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I hope it does. I had a a winemaker from he was at Chateau Saint Michel for a long time, and he said the exact same thing. It's like, yeah, if the climate just gets warmer, we can adjust the grapes easily, but these disasters we can't predict, we can't prevent. You can't. There's nothing you can do.
Yeah, it's not that as
And
simple
so,
as planting
yeah,
grapes that suit better to a warm climate. It's kind of, well, what about when that frost hits in August? Like, what are you supposed to do then? Your grapes wouldn't have fully ripened, so you've lost your entire crop. Like, it's crazy.
it's
Yeah, it's
scary.
horrible.
Yeah, and then you have the is it the EU or the French government that literally paid to dump like thousands of gallons of French wine. It's a weird
Yeah.
world. It's such a weird world. Anyway, so any other passions besides work?
Um, I take
Or things you like to do? Ride bike, walk?
I take a lot of film photography. That's always been fun for me since I travel for work a lot, and it's usually at quite a harried pace. That taking a moment and take a nice film photo, and you only ever get one or two, it's always been really important to me. It gives me a sense of kind of slowing
Yeah.
down and being a little bit more precocious and studied about my time. So that's something I've really enjoyed.
Nice. Yeah, it's like taking that moment of time of stillness and
Mm-hmm.
peace.
Even if it's just for 20 seconds to get adjust the ISO on my camera.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and those are memories too, right? They get to take them with you.
Yeah, especially when I fly around the world to go to Armenia for 3 days. Like, it's nice to have some memories that aren't just me in a car trying to stay awake with 7 coffees.
3 days. Oh wow, that's a really fast
Yeah,
trip.
that's the downside of most of these work trips. Japan for 5 days is pretty long, actually. That'll be nice.
Wow, yeah, and that's a long trip. Um, I do want to ask you one more question. I'll let you go. Just because of the trends that I've talked to different people on the podcast, and I'm curious of what's happening in in Canada. I saw an article that you wrote on it about the non-alcoholic spirits becoming a more popular. We've talked a little bit about the younger generation. Are you seeing it in restaurants more and more, like on the menus? And do you see it as something that's going to be pretty substantial, or at least a definitely going to be a part of the culture in
Yeah,
Canada?
in the Canada and the United States, non-alcoholic bottle shops, products, menu placements have become huge. Like, I think Boison, which is the non-alcoholic bottle shop, has 5 or 6 locations now around the United States, and it's a fully dedicated non-alcoholic bottle shop for spirits, canned drinks, etc., all that have 0 proof. In terms of menu placements, like I mentioned, my partner doesn't drink. So when we go out, we'll try and get a non-alcoholic cocktail. Since he doesn't drink, I'm far more conscious about my consumption around him. So I try and get one and then swap to a nice non-alcoholic drink that's still tasty. And I've noticed that almost every restaurant bar we go to has non-alcoholic options. And they used to be a bit of an afterthought, like a Coca-Cola or a craft soda, but they've become very conscious and thoughtful and creative. Non-alcoholic cocktails, non-alcoholic wines, non-alcoholic like spirits are on the menu, and a variety of them. It used to just be Seedlip, which is a fantastic brand and has done so much for paving the way for non-alcoholic spirits, but there's dozens and dozens and dozens of non-alcoholic products on the market now, and it's great to see those embraced. You have non-alcoholic Amaros. I have a non-alcoholic Scotch in my cupboard right now.
Really?
Yeah, there's
I haven't seen rums,
there's tons of vodkas. There's so many different alternatives.
Have you found any that are like your favorite, or is there a particular brand or anything that you find that are really good? I haven't tried enough of them yet.
The Gia ones are really good. They're little canned, like Amaro-y spritzes. Tilden makes great pre-mixed like cocktails in a big bottle, like a 750, which are delicious. Who else do I really like?
Yummy.
Proxies makes lovely non-alcoholic wines. They don't mimic actual varieties. They just kind of are lovely wines that they build off a lot of like seeds and juices made with grape varieties. So those are really, really, I can see a bottle on my kitchen counter right now, actually.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm home for a week.
Nice.
So
that's awesome.
My body needed a break from drinking for a little bit, so I've been having a glass of that.
Nice. Yeah, so you still get the idea of having a drink and you get to mix it up. I mean, one of the things, I had Athletic Brewing on here, the two owners, and they interviewed, or they asked their customers questions, and they said one of the biggest surprises was people that drink still want a non-alcoholic beverage, because if they're out and about, they don't want to drink 5 drinks. They want to drink a couple of drinks and then have a non-alcoholic drink, and then maybe go back to an alcohol drink and take a break. So I think that's interesting that from your perspective that you're doing the same thing.
Yeah, and I think what was the IWSR number, was like 3/4 of people who purchase non-alcoholic products are people who drink, who just are a little bit more concerned about moderation, taking a night off, et cetera, et cetera. So the category has huge staying power.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, I'm glad to see that. That's what we're seeing here too. Kind of leaning into it a little bit, leaning into sake and leaning into the non-alcoholic section, because I think it's important, and I think it's gonna, you're leaving money on the table if you're not participating, because it's a lot more expensive for a consumer to buy a non-alcoholic whatever, cocktail or whatever, versus a Coke or water, or sparkling water, or whatever.
Makes them feel more included too, rather than just drinking water while I'm having a glass of wine. That kind of sucks.
Yeah, exactly. You get to be more part of the party. Well, Kate, this has been awesome. I love what you're doing for the industry. Keep it going. Congratulations on such a successful career. You're very inspiring.
Oh, thank you.
And yeah, I'm super inspired by you and what you're doing. I love reading your stories. Can't wait to hear what comes out of Japan. So enjoy, and have a good holiday season. Best of luck to you. Yeah, we'll have to keep in touch.
Sounds great.
I'll keep following you. Alrighty. Well, again, a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Bye-bye. Next week, I'm speaking with Stephanie Houston, president and co-founder of Island Getaway Rum, which are island-inspired and Texas-made down in Dripping Springs, Texas. Stephanie's family comes from the Canary Islands by way of Mexico to Texas over 100+ years ago. She's the first Latina rum producer in the state of Texas and beyond. We discussed how to ask for help as you embark on any new adventure, and as in her case now, they jump into brand building and distribution as a new brand picked up from RNDC by way of LibDib. Congratulations, team. That's huge. That's awesome. Woohoo! She's built and sold businesses as big as nearly 700 people and owned and run a music venue to help revive Deep Ellum. She then moved to Austin to recharge and think about her new venture. Soon after, she found her place as an owner with Island Getaway Rums, and she's never looked back. Stephanie is a strong entrepreneur dedicated not only to her brand, but also an activist in celebrating and lifting up other women and Latina-owned companies. She truly believes when you help one grow, you help them all rise up together. The rums are extremely high quality with a beautiful package and branding, and for the retail price, it's second to none. It's one of the best deals in the market. Do not miss this opportunity to try these rums or potentially invest in one of the best products and certainly the best rums in the market. Tune in next Thursday and have a great week. This week's episode was produced by Fedora J Productions.